Okay, Marty. Final part. Um, Now, I'm told that you once commented to a friend of yours about someone that you knew that had a huge return on investment on a very niche market. And you said if he's clever enough to work that out, why doesn't he do it on something he can actually get a decent bet on? Do you recall that?
No, but I mean, it does sound like something I might have said. It's something you have to take into account as well. There's no point having a 15% edge betting on the Belgian third division. Well, not that it's useless, but you're much better off with a 1% edge betting on the Premiership. So you'd have to take into account the size of the market as well as your edge in anything you bet on. And I've always tried to, I've always went after the big ones. Horse races, that's not a huge market, but even doing those lucky 15s, you can't really get huge stakes in lucky 15s, but we farmed up to the scale that over at Cheltenham we were getting 100 grand on some days on bets. That's enough to make it worthwhile. It was a very good edge anyway, but even if it's a small edge, that sort of money is enough. Football, you get about 100 grand at a Premiership game. So they were the two that I kind of focused on.
The football's always been your biggest sport since you finished playing poker.
Stake wise, yeah, we had pretty big stakes in football for a while, but horse racing was the biggest earner. Even though we couldn't get quite as much on, we had far more bets because you're active every day, and the edge was much bigger. So they were both kind of similar, I guess, in terms of how much I made from each.
And the horse racing, as you talked about in the previous part, was purely on the maths. Wasn't somebody
at the beginning, just purely maths, no opinion at all. And then what happened was once we had so many accounts and we were able to get so much money on pros, I would hear from different pros who would ask me could I get them a bet on whatever horses their model liked. So we sort of branched into like a brokerage as well for professionals. We were still doing the stuff we were doing, but I won't mention their names, but professional X might have sent me 4 bets in the morning and can you give me 2 grand on each of those? I would have got them as 2 grand, and we stick them into our multiples and earn from them as well. So there was a bit of knowledge that went into it, not our own knowledge, but there's a bit of knowledge that fed into it over time.
And you can still stay under the radar with the football. When you bet into those sort of levels, no, you're not doing anything at the moment, but when you were having it really on, even if you had wins on multiples, did the bookie sort of thing, oh well, that's just somebody struck lucky
at that level? No, that was the horse racing was we were using Bet365s and Ladbrokes and Paddy Powers and stuff for horse racing, and we did multiples partly because it helps you to stay under the radar, because you spend most of the time losing and then you get one big bet up, and the bookmaker can very easily put that down to one lucky bet when they see that you've been losing for the previous 3 months. But also it increases the edge. If you put 10 to 10% chances into a double, it's a bigger edge than just 10%. So it increased their edge and it helped us stay under the radar. It was twofold. Football, we didn't really use sites like that for football. It was all with Asian handicap betting, so we go through agents in London. We were betting up to 100 grand a game at one point. Although we probably shouldn't have been. We did very well at football for a few years, betting smaller stakes. And then we scaled up, and in scaling up, at the time we scaled up as well, the bookies' margins had got a bit bigger, so you're maybe having to take 1 point less for that, and because we're betting in bigger size, we might have had to take 2 or 3 points less. So we found that whenever we scaled up and started betting at those levels, we actually were profitable. So now we've just gone down, bet between 5 and 10 grand a game, but I'm always getting best price in the market. And even with that, we just have a tiny edge. To be honest, I wouldn't be that. If someone told me I could never place a bet on football tomorrow, I might even think that was a positive. It would free up time to do other stuff that I'm probably better at.
Because there's some massive, obviously very successful syndicates in that football market that you're up against.
Yeah, I mean it's the market's far more efficient now than it was whenever we started 10 years ago. The big guys, I'm sure Tony Bloom. Probably just Tony Bloom, he knows what the price is in every game, and the bookies could shave another 5% off their profit margins and he'd still find ways to beat them. But for me, and probably for most syndicates, I think to be profitable you need to be getting pretty close to top price in the market, and you can't do that and have 6-figure stakes on. So that's the level we're at, yeah.
And if it was all about just getting the biggest return on investment, which sport would you concentrate on?
For me personally, probably snooker, live in place snooker. Something I think I'm very good at pricing up a situation. You know, looking at where the balls are and the scores, and assigning a pretty accurate probability to the outcome of that game. And you can't get much money on it. You know, I do it over the World Championships each year, and it's just like a little kind of treat for me. You know, I love betting at snooker. There's just no point doing it the rest of the year. But over the World Championships, there's a bit of a market. Still probably not worth my while, but I enjoy it. I'd say that's probably the biggest edge I could have. You know, using my own knowledge and my own feel, I suppose.
And do you get involved with the NFL or the cricket?
Cricket, no. I mean, I've got bets on for people in cricket, people who are smart. But the cricket market's so big, you generally find that people have their own nets. You know, they don't need to. It's not like horse racing where professional X has his accounts closed, or all the guys he's used has his accounts closed, and he has to come looking for people to get bets on. You find if you can beat cricket, you know, the exchange markets are big enough. You don't need people like me to get you on. So I've never really got into cricket. I love NFL. Don't know a lot about it, but I was getting bets. No one has a big edge in NFL. That's the thing. So you're getting bets on for these people, and you know, it might be 1 or 2% or something like that. But if you actually enjoy it and you like watching it as well, then, you know, happy to have a 1% bet and have an interest in it.
That's the next question. I mean, can you enjoy a sport and watch it without having a bet, and vice versa? If you've got a colossal amount of money rolling on, is it enjoyable to watch?
It depends. I mean, I could certainly enjoy watching a sport and not having a bet, but it would probably need to be not necessarily a high profile sport. But I think in any sport, I like watching the two best players against each other, the two best teams against each other. So I love football. Maybe have a soft spot for Liverpool, but I wouldn't say I was a Liverpool supporter. You know, I love watching Man United against Arsenal back in the late 90s, you know, early 2000s, or Barcelona against Real Madrid, or Federer against Nadal, or Phil Taylor against Barneveld, or O'Sullivan against Selby. You know, when you were watching the people or teams that are at the very top, you know, I can enjoy watching any sport like that, whether I had a bet on it or not. And you flip that around, you know, I've had some massive sweats in horse racing, you know, high six-figure sweats when you have a lucky 15 rolling up on good prices. And generally I wouldn't watch the race. I might watch it sometimes. I'd be more likely to just watch the Betfair prices changing, refresh Betfair, see how the horses are going.
You wouldn't be stood in front of the telly giving it the whip?
No, not at all. I don't really enjoy horse racing and never have. If it was football, I guess, if I had a big football sweat, yeah, I'd probably watch the game. But yeah, I certainly am capable of watching a game without a bet, and also not watching a game that I have a bet on.
Yeah, so it's no secret now, because you've already said it in the interview, that you used to like putting on multiples and sort of to disguise what you're doing. Obviously be a lot of variance in that sort of way you do it. So did you were you good with your maths? Do you factor in the variance, and have you got sort of an expected losing run that once you go over it, you might start to get a bit twitchy?
It's never really got to that point, to be honest. I mean, with horse racing, I could never bet enough to, you know, you couldn't get enough on that the bad run would actually wipe me out, if you know what I mean. I was probably far enough ahead at that point whenever we were sticking that level that we could have absorbed it. The variance isn't as big as you'd expect with doing those multiples, you know. Like there's probably less variance doing lucky 15s at big prices when the edge is 25-30% than there are doing singles that are like 2 or 3%. You know, the swings actually aren't that big, especially when you're getting like treble odds for 1 winner and stuff. It doesn't really work anymore because of not because bookies have got smarter, although a little bit of that, but it's mostly because they were saved by the gambling commission clamping down on responsible gambling and AML and stuff like that. So it used to be like we could have just deposited 25 grand to someone's Bet365 through Skrill. Could have been an 18-year-old girl. And you could just fire off those 25 grand's worth of bets, no questions asked, unless you won. Whereas nowadays you can't even deposit a grand to someone's account without the responsible gambling team calling you up on Monday to make sure that you're in control. And you know, I guess it's probably a good thing for society as a whole, but it just made what we were doing not impossible, but it made it a real grind, you know. So To all the bookies who might be watching this, we don't really bother with that anymore. I can still get a bet on horse racing through guys that are in shops or through a few private layers, but it's not something I'm really bothering with now.
Yeah, because also, I mean, like the bookies used to say about laying credit bets, you got to win twice because you got to get paid, and that was the same thing, vice versa, with people using multiple accounts.
Yeah. I mean, I had a couple of big voids like that, and with hindsight, they're probably fair enough. We were taking the piss a bit too much. I've no quarrel even with some bookies are pretty dishonourable, but mentioned Bet365 there. I think a lot of people think I have a problem with Bet365. I actually love Bet365. They're the best. They're the best bookie for mug punters. They offer the best prices, best bonuses. They're the best bookie for pros. They take a bet and they'll take on they will take you on. If you're not betting bad each ways and snidey stuff, they generally will give you a spin, and they generally paid as well. And most bookies do, as long as you're not betting anything bent, which we never did, or you're not completely taking the piss. You generally their process would be they would just pay you and close your account. They might give you a bit of a KYC run around and delay paying you for a while, but yeah, we generally get paid.
You mentioned that you sort of turned all that in now because you just can't sort of do it. Is it possible for somebody who's got a bit of an edge and think they've got a bit of an edge with the odds and the sort of football and that to sneak under the radar with these multiples?
Yeah, for sure, but it's hard enough to get an edge in football whenever you're betting, at the exchange price, or betting with these brokers who are, operating at a profit margin of like 2%. But when you're betting with Paddy Power and Ladbrokes and firms like that, his margin might be 7 or 8%. It's going to be very hard to find a lot of profitable football bets that stick in the multiples, But yeah, if you do have an edge, the principle still applies. That I think you're much better off doing multiples than doing singles, and accepting the variance, to create longevity on the account. Yeah.
Okay, so coming to the end of this, so I'm going to go back to poker. You retired when you were still a young man. Why did you decide to turn it in? Well, you retired from or did it retire you?
Yeah, I wouldn't say retired, I guess. Kind of the way I got into poker just happened naturally. It wasn't like I decided I'm going to be a pro now. But around about 2010, I could see I didn't have really any edge in the online games. I could see, even though I was winning some of these tournaments, I could still see that other players were popping up that were better than me. At the start, I'd never really played at a table where there was someone that was much better than me. There's a few guys around my level, or maybe a few that were a little bit better, but no one that I was out of my depth in. And there was loads of bad players. But after 2010, you started seeing that there weren't as many bad players, and there was now a couple of guys who were, head and shoulders above me, and more guys that were my level. So I could just see that it was getting harder each year. So yeah, I just kind of made a decision to play poker less, and then I ended up just, the other stuff was going so well that I all but quit poker for about 10 years. It's only the last couple of years really that I've gone back and started playing occasional tournaments. It's more for fun than anything else.
So is part of your success and longevity knowing when your edge is dwindled and to get out before it's totally gone?
Yeah, I think that's probably the smartest decision I made in poker was quitting at the time that I did, yeah.
How much has the game changed since you were flying your highest?
It's hard for me to say because I don't play that much anymore, but certainly harder, but not that much harder. I think probably another problem with 2010 was I wasn't playing as well. I'd had all that success for a couple of years, and I don't think I was cocky and thought I was better than I was, but maybe because I wasn't as hungry. I didn't need the money. I didn't, I just wasn't able to focus, or didn't need to focus the way I had before. I certainly think of the tournaments I've played over the last couple of years, I feel like I'm much better now than I was whenever I stopped. And the standard's better, but not there's still plenty of bad players around as well. It's just the top guys, once you get to the tail end of tournaments when most of the bad players have been knocked out, there's no easy spots, But I feel like I've still got a chance when I play in a poker tournament even now.
I suppose a bad player that thinks they're good is like the poker equivalent of Bet365 account, is it?
Yeah. I mean, every poker player thinks they're good. I'm probably one of the few poker players that even when I was doing well, I never really thought I was that good. And honestly, I probably wasn't. It's like I said, I was like one of the best players in the 70s. They weren't actually that good. It was just everyone was crap. And I kind of think that's the way I think of myself as a poker player. I was good when no one was really very good, but I'm like way off the top guys now.
So finally, I mean, all this stuff we talked about for the last 4 parts. I mean, you've been very successful in all sorts of gambling, but you've knocked it. You sort of retired. So what's retirement looking at 50?
Oh, I haven't retired. Like I still do a bit of gambling. Not much. You know, I used to spend about 30 hours a week. Sorry, 60 hours a week on horse racing and football. Maybe a couple of days a week, someone might send me a horse racing bet and ask me, can I help with it? I'll try and get a bit on. Football probably takes up 10, 15 hours a week, something like that. But I'm involved with a business now, so me and my brother and a friend from school started a sports statistics business together, trying to service professional clubs, and now we focus on under 18 football in America. So that keeps me, not that I do a whole lot on the business side, but between that and the gambling, I'm certainly not retired anyway.
Brilliant. Well, Marty Smyth, thank you very much for coming out from behind the bushel after all the pressure. I really do appreciate it. I'm sure everybody watching this does as well. So
it wasn't so bad.
Marty Smyth, thank you very much.
Cheers.